Chapter 8. I arrived at the hospital ahead of time and Sarah was already waiting for me. "He's in the private room," she said as we stepped into the lift and went up to the 6th floor. "So you don't have to worry about anyone catching you. I'm glad you came," she added. "I hate visiting on my own." We went into his room and I stared at the little boy in the bed. He looked like he was fast asleep. If it hadn't been for all the hospital equipment that he was connected to, I would have sworn that I could have just shaken him by the shoulders and woken him up. There was a drip running from a bag on a hook into his arm. A machine on his right-hand side had a screen on it. The numbers and lines kept changing, and it gave a bip, bip, bip sound every so often. "This is Andy," said Sarah. "What's the matter?" she asked, turning to look at me. "Shouldn't we keep the noise down?" I said. "We don't want to disturb him." She laughed and I realised how stupid this had sounded. "Danny, if he hears us and wakes up, well, that's a good thing, remember?" "Of course," I said, "sorry." "Don't you want to say hello to him?" she asked me then. "To Andy?" "Yes." I looked down at him and swallowed nervously. He had a small, round face and his hair was the same shade of red as Sarah's. He had a few freckles around his nose too. His mouth was open and he was wearing Rupert Bear pyjamas, the same ones I used to have when I was small. "Hi, Andy," I said, feeling awkward and embarrassed. "Andy," said Sarah, "this is my friend Danny. He's come to visit you." "Do you think he can hear us?" I asked her, and she shrugged her shoulders. "The doctors say he can, and even if he can't, it doesn't do any harm to talk to him, does it? It's better than sitting here saying nothing." "I suppose so," I said. "He doesn't look like he's in any pain, does he?" "No," she said, shaking her head and looking very sad. "I hope he isn't anyway." "My brother Pete was in hospital once," I told her, "when he had his appendix out. He missed the last few weeks of school because of it. He went around for days saying he had a pain in his stomach and no one believed him. Then one night it exploded inside him and he could have died, only he didn't, but we did get to ride in an ambulance. I don't know what Mum would have done if he hadn't got better, because he's her favourite." I turned around when I realised that Sarah wasn't standing beside me anymore. She was sitting in an armchair in the corner of the room, holding her face in her hands. "Sarah," I said quietly, walking towards her, "are you all right?" "It was only supposed to be a game," she said, looking up at me now. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. "It wasn't supposed to end like this." "What was?" I asked her. "What was a game?" "The afternoon that he got hit," she said. "We were always playing games like that, giving each other dares to do. He always did whatever I told him." I wanted to sit down, but the only place to sit was on the side of Andy's bed, and I didn't think that would be right. "That afternoon," she went on, "I told him about Knockdown Ginger. You've played that, right?" "Of course," I said. "Ringing doorbells and running away. I used to do it all the time." "The house across the road from us," she continued, "number 42. They have a big dog and when you walk past you can hear it inside because it barks really loudly." I dared Andy to go across and creep up the driveway without the dog hearing him, then ring the doorbell and run away. I said I'd watch him from my bedroom window upstairs, and he said he'd do it. He walked up the driveway, and when he got to the door, he turned around and looked up and gave me a big smile and a thumbs up to say the dog wasn't barking. Then he turned back and put his finger on the doorbell. The second he rang it, I knew the dog had gone crazy inside because he nearly jumped out of his skin. He got such a fright, in fact, that he leapt away from the door and ran straight out onto the road without thinking, and when he ran out there, that's when... She buried her face in her hands again, and this time I could hear her sobbing. "Sarah," I said, coming towards her, unsure what to do to console her. "You see, Danny," she said, looking up, "the whole thing's my fault. If I hadn't been playing that stupid game with him, if I hadn't dared him to play Knockdown Ginger on the door of number 42, then Mum would never have hit him," I said, finishing her sentence for her. I started to feel angry thinking about it. She thinks it was all her fault, But it wasn't, was it? I wanted to say more, to tell her how things were at home because of her stupid game, but I could hear voices suddenly, just outside the room, and Sarah and I looked towards the door at the same moment and then back at each other in fright. "Mum and Dad," she said, her face growing even whiter now. "You've got to hide. They'll go mad if they find you here, under the bed." "What?" "Get under the bed," she insisted. "The sheets go all the way to the floor. They'll never see you there." I turned and looked at the bed and at Andy, lying in it. The last place I wanted to be was underneath it. "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "I can't do it." "Danny, you have to," she insisted. And the door opened slightly and we could hear a woman's voice talking to a doctor outside. "Quick," she said, pushing me towards it. And before I knew what was happening, I was sliding across the floor and crawling under the bed. The moment I did, I heard the door open fully and the sound of 4 feet coming into the room. "Sarah, there you are," said a woman's voice. I felt her get very close to where I was and guessed that she was leaning down to kiss Andy, because I could smell her perfume. And then she said, "Hello, my darling," under her breath. "Have you been crying?" asked her father. "A little bit," said Sarah. "I hate seeing you so upset," said her mum, sighing loudly. When I think about what that woman has done to this family, my lip curled a little in anger. I hoped she wasn't going to start saying mean things about Mum, or I wouldn't know what to do. "We spoke to Dr. Harris," said her father. "He said that Andy is still stable at the moment, which is a good sign. At least he isn't getting any worse." "We might as well tell her, Michael." "Tell her what?" asked Sarah. There was a brief pause and then her father spoke again. "We were at the police station this afternoon," he said. "They've confirmed that they won't be pressing any charges against Rachel Delaney." "Can you believe it?" said her mum furiously. "That maniac goes racing down our road, practically kills my little boy, and they're not even going to charge her for it. What kind of justice system do we have anyway when someone can—" "Samantha," they explained it to us. "It wasn't entirely her fault." "Oh, what? So you're saying it was Andy's fault?" she asked. "You're blaming him for what happened?" "Of course I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying that if—" "It's absolutely ridiculous," she shouted. "That woman, that bloody woman with no sense of right or wrong does this, and she just gets away with it scot-free." "Well, I'm not having it. If I have to go round there myself and—" I couldn't listen anymore. I scrambled out from under the bed, almost hitting my head on the metal frame as I did so. Sarah's father shouted in surprise, and her mum jumped back as if she'd seen a mouse. "It wasn't her," I yelled at them, feeling my face grow red now with anger. "It was Sarah. Why don't you ask her what really happened, and then you'll—" I stopped myself from saying anything else. We all looked at each other, not knowing what to say. There was only one thing I could do. I ran.